We're dead.
We're not dead.
We are dead.
Come on, we got all day tomorrow to come up with a story.
All day tomorrow? We had a month and a half to come up with something, and we didn't do anything.
So we'll do it tomorrow.
Let me ask you something. When's the last time you went skiing?
About 6 years ago.
I think you can take the lift ticket off your jacket now.
Women like skiers.
So what? You can't meet anybody. You're going out with Susan.
Yeah, right.
Hey, you see those two women over there? I almost dated the one on the right. She's in the closet business.
The closet business? What's the closet business?
What is it your business?
I'm interested.
She reorganizes your closet, shows you how to maximize your closet space. She looked into my closet.
So you thought she was good looking and figured this would be a good way to meet her?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened?
So she mentioned she had a boyfriend and then it hit me. What do I need more closet space for? I love our stupid scene song. Hello and welcome to the Say Report. I'm your host, Devon Decker, and joining me from George Costanza, Sejohn Sarowick.
Hey everybody, this is Sejohn Sarowick. We're here to talk to you today about one thing and one thing only.
Shallow Hal, because you have just tumbled into the Time Capsule.
Oh, welcome everybody. We don't know when this is going out, so we don't know when. No, we know when we're recording. I was about to say we don't know when we're recording.
We don't know when we're recording.
Look, we exist in time and space in our own way, but yeah, you know, every now and then something comes up, and I hope everybody's okay. But we need to throw one of these in, so we're not sure. We don't like to talk about things that really kind of date the episode. So today Devon's decided to pick our topic, and it was Shallow Hal.
It was
a movie
Hal.
A movie that was dated when it came out. So like
oh dude. And that's like ugh.
Okay. So let's start this thing.
Let's start
get
this
into
thing.
this.
First of all, before we go any further,
should people see this movie before we do the episode?
I don't know what I would recommend. I don't know
Okay.
if I'd recommend watching the movie and then listening to us talk about this movie, or if I would recommend listening to us talk about it and then being like, no, it can't be as bad as they're saying, and then being proven wrong, because it's probably worse than we're going to portray it.
Yeah, I think you should listen first. So don't even bother going to see it. Or at least make your own decision maybe at the end of this thing.
Which is why I'm going to take this moment right now to thank you, Sejohn, for letting me be Jerry Seinfeld. Usually I play a Kramer or a George. I mean, usually you fall into the Newman role.
Oh, thank you for that one.
You do.
I do have all the muffin tops though, the muffin bottoms actually. But no, you're very much the Jerry in my life. But
Yeah, I know.
There was very much that led me to the Seinfeld bits from this movie, and it's hard for me to talk about this movie and not talk about Seinfeld, which is weird because it's not a direct correlation in any way, and it's not just because Jason Alexander is in this movie as second lead in a buddy move. What is that casting about?
Well, he needed to slingshot back after playing Boris in The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Yeah, he's trying real hard to kind of find what his next step was going to be after Seinfeld, I think. And this was kind of when did Seinfeld end? What was the year on that?
Seinfeld ended in 1998 because I specifically went and did some research to be like, this wasn't his next thing after Seinfeld, was it? And it wasn't. No, he had bounced through some other stuff.
No. And I also wanted to point out that the other thing that this made me think a lot of, but we're not going to talk much about because I hate him, is also Neil LaBute owes these guys his entire career. I just want to put that out there right now. Devon, did I lose you completely?
You brought up Neil LaBute, and
yeah,
you know how I feel about him.
Well, I know, yeah. Neither of us are fans.
Rightfully so.
But yeah, no, this was Shallow Hal hits theaters in 2001 and 2005, I believe, is when Fat Pig comes out of nowhere and really kind of boosts him. I mean, he had been working before that. It wasn't his first play, but Fat Pig is definitely a turning point in his career.
Hit for him, yeah.
It premiered off Broadway, and I think it might be his last one that premiered off Broadway. I'm pretty sure everything since then has been a pretty straightforward
Not only
play.
that, Some Girls got that film adaptation with Adam Brody.
Oh yeah, I don't know if he's had a movie. I don't know if he's had a play that didn't have a film adaptation, in some form. You know, Fat Pig had its had a weird made for TV version.
Yeah, I don't
Uh,
count made for TV. No offense, made for
Things.
TV movies.
Well, no, they were like HBO, like Showtime, like
I
film.
don't. I
Like,
never knew that Fat Pig had one. To be completely honest
um,
with you,
I'm pretty sure I might be misremembering that one, but the one that I'm thinking of is Paul Rudd. No, it did because Paul Rudd was in it, or maybe I'm thinking of the play.
you're
But
thinking of The
anyway,
Shape of Things. Are you
no, no,
thinking of
no.
The Shape of Things?
Paul Rudd, well, that's the other thing I was going to get at with Neil Butte is, and again, I don't want to talk about him for too long, but he has a very weird relationship with certain actors that seem to really respect him. Paul Rudd being one of them, because I know he's been in a few of his um, productions on Broadway. Not to mention being in the Shape of Things movie as well. But yeah, so like, and watching this movie, I'm thinking the entire time, oh, this is just Fat Pig. This is like everything about this movie is that. It's just a very different take on that story in terms of like it's a comedy as opposed to a drama, right? But what's really interesting is that, Shallow Hal is pretty lukewarm, if not straight up cold in terms of its in terms of how it was received by audiences and critics. Whereas like Fat Pig, as we talked about, is this thing that works for LaBute in a way that he wins a ton of awards, and he's given such high praise for tackling such a hard topic to talk about. And it's the same kind of crap that's always said about Neil LaBute, is that he handles these dark pieces of our culture in a way that nobody else can, with like truth and realism. And Fat Pig being that this story of a. Should we talk about what the story is? I guess
I
we're all.
guess, yeah, you kind of went
Yeah.
off on Neil LaBute. I would, if you weren't halfway across the country, I would have hit you. I would have hit you the second you said his name.
Yeah, it's sorry. This movie got me thinking. That's so yeah. So that's my stance. You said that you wouldn't recommend this to anybody, and I'm kind of there with you. But like, it's hard because this movie does also generate a lot of interest
All
for
right,
me.
so here's what I'm going to say. Here's what I'm
Okay.
going to say before we go any further. I have 3 pages of notes. And
Yeah.
note number 6 is my nominee for best Farrelly Brothers film. Now I wrote that during the first scene while they're at the dance club, like grinding up on women, thinking this
Oh,
is
okay. I
how we're
thought you
going
meant.
to meet women.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like,
Um.
because that's a fun,
Okay.
happy scene. But like by the end of it, I'm surprised I didn't put it down as a note. I'm like, I revoke my nomination for best Farrelly Brothers film.
So whereas with me and my notes, just to contrast this, I pulled up my note-taking software so that I could like type up as I was watching and stuff and look up things and all this shit. And about 20 minutes in, I stopped taking any real significant notes, and honestly hadn't been before that, and didn't for the rest of the movie. Part of that was disinterest. But part of that was also that but part of it was also that I was genuinely watching the movie. Like, as much as I was like not interested in actually like engaging with a lot of stuff in it, I was still there, present in it, and like in it to the point where I wasn't paying attention to other things. So that was really weird for me because I didn't expect that. And again, I don't want it to come across like I enjoyed this movie. I'm squarely with Devon on this, that it is just awful in a lot of ways. But there's something in this movie. And yeah, so before we go any further, though, can you give us a rundown of
All right.
Shallow Hal?
So Shallow Hal tells the story of Hal, who, when he was 9 years old, watched his father die, and his father's dying words were, "Find a woman with a nice can and a beautiful pair of breasts." His father being a reverend, this is probably the first time
Yeah,
he's ever referenced the female form to his son,
sure.
his young son. He's also played by Bruce McGill, which is my
Yeah,
first note, because
yeah, yeah.
I always thought it was the guy who played Sean Hunter's dad from
Ah,
Boy Meets World. But no,
the
it's
guy that
Bruce
took
McGill.
over Slinky Dog there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
so he is given this goal to like basically be superficial. Look for a woman who is pleasing on the eyes, because that's the most important thing. This is the message that he is imparted by his dying father. And then we
yes.
cut years later. So he's got to be in about his 30s in this film, right? Like, I want to probably, where would you say his age is?
It's tough because while on one hand he is supposed to be bad with women and like still out there and trying to like work it so like it does make sense for him to be in maybe his early 30s to me. But like at the same time, he's also super young. Like this is this is the kind of story and character that could work with a 23-year-old. You know what I mean? Like if they wanted to say that he was maybe like a Ted Mosby, like 26, which is actually like a 34. You know what I mean? Like maybe
Yeah.
that's where I think that might be. But now that you say 30s,
It
this is
feels like a 20-year jump from
right,
when his
right,
father
right.
dies.
Well, and also like Jason Alexander being his best friend. Like there's no making Jason Alexander seem like he's in his even 30s, right? So like there's also this weird like there's this weird thing that your head is trying to figure out is what is the story of this world? How is time working, right? And that's not even the point of this movie, but
Well,
you're
maybe
already
it
caught up
is
in
the
some of
point of
the
this movie because Hal is only looking for the superficial, right? He
right,
is
right.
shallow because he only cares about looks. He doesn't care about brains or intelligence. Though when asked about it, he says, "Oh yeah, I'd like her to like be smart, know about culture and shit." Like that's his
Yes.
exact line.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I guess he's been so brainwashed by these dying words of his father that he just feels like those things are going to come along with the package. Like
Right.
that if she is beautiful, then she will also be intelligent.
Right.
It's really an interesting thing. He's quite the broken character when we find him.
Right. Right. He is this weird, complex, broken character, which like for the Farrelly brothers, having a broken male being their lead is nothing new, right? Like that's what they deal in. You know, Dumb and Dumber. You know, something about Mary. Like you have these guys that are in some way hugely flawed to a comic extent, right? And in this, the extent is that he is so superficial in his views on women that it is comical the way that he like looks and says things, right? Looks at things and says things, and but there's a weird aspect to it with the idea that this with Dumb and Dumber we don't really ever learn about why they're dumb. Fuck Dumb and Dumber 2, like
Wait, do you mean
or
fuck Dumb and Dumber
Dumb
2
and
or Dumb
Dumber.
and
I mean,
Dumberer?
Dumb and Dumber, the prequel, because that is nothing and doesn't. It's not like that explains how they got dumb. They're still dumb in that movie, right? So like there's no background to why they're idiots, right? They just are, and that's when it becomes like a Three Stooges bit, right? Like we don't care why these guys are incompetent. It's just funny to watch them be incompetent. Whereas with Hal, it's not really ever funny that he is shallow like he is, although I think it's supposed to be in moments. But there is this weird explanation for why he is, and I think that doesn't help. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if they were trying to make it funny that like this is the way that he has been brought up, and like, but what it is a pure example of toxic masculinity. He has learned from his father the ways to treat women, and it's an inappropriate way. And because his father dies before he gets a chance to explain the nuances of what he was even saying, not that I think that that would even justify what he was saying. There's still this moment of like oh, like he just never learned because the one person that was supposed to teach him taught him horribly and then disappeared from the picture without a chance to fix it. So like there's no fixing this. This character is just broken and there's no fixing it is essentially like your immediate feelings on this character before the story even gets going. Is very weird for a comedy.
It is. And honestly, you're right. If we just joined him, like if you missed that first scene with his father and you just joined him in progress as like this shallow guy, it wouldn't be that far off the mark for some people in society who are only going after that. Like, does
Right.
that make sense?
Well, and again, not to, oh man, it's really hard to not think about the Neil Butte stuff, but like
You
the
can
friend
do
in
it. It's
that,
fine.
I know, but like the friend character in that, right, is I cannot think of him
Josh
as anything
Short.
but Josh
That's
Short, but yeah,
all I'm
yeah,
seeing in my head. It's fine.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So the Josh Short character, no, I don't want to do that to Josh. He's a great guy. But there's the friend character in that, and he is that, right? He is the guy that you meet. And so Jason Alexander, to an extent, although at some point they try and redeem him too, right? There's this idea that they don't want to paint these one-dimensional characters. The Farrelly brothers don't want to paint these one-dimensional characters, right? Whereas like LaBute is not afraid to. He's like, this is what some people are. Some people are one-dimensional and superficial and shitty, right? And they are shallow people, and they exist in the world, and there's no hiding from that, right? And it's hard because it's hard to argue with that feeling, but at the same time also we want to believe that all humans are complex and there's an explanation for all this. So it's weird because I think the Farley brothers are trying to inject some sense of morality into this story through showing you like exactly what I was saying. In a weird way, they mean exactly what I think they mean. he was taught very shitty things by a male figure in his life on how to treat women, and it has led to him being this. It's just the idea that they're trying to make that funny that just doesn't ever work for me.
Okay, well, the
It's
big
not.
issue is that he's not just shallow; he's also creepy.
Yes.
Like they're not nice guys outside of the fact that they're shallow. They have
Well,
other flaws as well.
yes, other flaws, but we are also then shown things like the way that he talks to the kids in the
Don't we're gonna bring that up later.
yeah
We're gonna
yeah
bring
yeah.
that up later because that is a great moment and it's a great thing, but it's also kind of problematic
Oh yeah
in terms of the whole story. And I
yeah
can't wait to get there because big part of what I wrote down. Not gonna lie.
yeah.
But the first question that I have is, first of all, Jack Black. I don't think he's been in better shape than he was in this film. Like it feels
Yeah, I
like the
mean,
trimmest Jack Black has ever been in a movie. Not
if
to
you
disparage him in any way, shape, or form, but like they made him lose weight for this role.
I'm sure that that's part of it. The other thing is that this is also around the time that Tenacious D is really big, hence why Kyle Gass is also in the film. Um, and they were touring and doing all sorts of crazy, and like he was in really good shape. If you ever watched the Tenacious D show that they did, like he was in that, he was kind of starting to. It was in that point of his career where he didn't quite know what he was going to be doing next, but he did what every male, female actor, actress does in that position, and they just try and start to get fit so that they can at least be available for anything and everything that, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like he was coming to that point in his career where he thought maybe I got to start losing weight so that I can keep this thing up. He didn't quite realize, no, I'm actually going to do better as the guy that just is himself, right? And he did learn that eventually. Jack Black, I mean, it like learns this eventually, and it's why he is in the place that he is now. You know what I mean? Like I'm actually about to go see a Jack Black movie this week. I am
me too.
100%
I'm
sure.
totally seeing the
Yeah.
close with the clock in its
Yeah,
walls.
I'm 100% sure I'm going to end up seeing that film this week. Yeah, so
I'm excited.
like right. So like Jack, so I think some of it is that, but it's funny that that leads to him in this moment also being in this movie about superficiality and weight, right? But I think that's more of a happy accident more than anything. Like
Well,
I
I mean,
don't
they
think he went
definitely
out,
did make him lose weight for the role. He
but
had
I
to
don't think
lose weight for the role.
but if they
That's
were right, but in a weird way, I don't know how much the weight they really wanted him to lose because at the end of the day, he's still pretty hefty in this movie compared to like he's not like a
he's not a
sexy
Brad Pitt type. You're
workout like
right.
well right like he's not a guy hitting the gym. So it's weird his superficiality about women does not seem to apply to all aspects of life, right? Like it only seems to apply to like like the woman that he's going to end up with. You know what I mean? It's not
Yeah,
this weird thing where like in Fat Pig, for instance, where they look at every person out of shape, everything wrong. Because like look at his relationship with Walt, right? Like I think this is a perfect example of this. He has the line. The dude's just playing the hand that he was dealt, right? And he has this understanding that there are that people in those in positions. Walt, for anybody that hasn't seen the movie, is an
yes,
actor, an
spina
actual
bifida.
who has spina bifida and actually walks around on his arms and hands. So he's like the joke in the movie. He is super buff, like torso up, and like that's how he gets through life. Is he basically uses that as like a tool to like get women and to like get by in life. Is like he jokes about himself, but also like because he's in on the joke is super cool and chill. Walt's an awesome character actually,
I
and
think
like
Walt is creepy too. I'm
you think
sorry. I
you think
think,
Walt
and
is
maybe
creepy
it's
too?
it's coming from 2018, looking back. But like, there's a pair of panties I recognize, and at
Oh
your
no.
cervix.
The language and the dialogue writ large in this entire movie is creepy, and
Okay,
like for sure, like that's true. Like I'm coming at it from let's recognize that everybody in this movie sucks, and like go from there. But you're not wrong. No. He's got awful dialogue as well. But the relationship between him and Hal is important to the story because it shows that Hal is totally willing to look past like a person's physical appearance to see the person inside. It's specifically the woman that he is going to spend the rest of his life with. He was told by his father, like I went after your mother and because I loved her, not because of looks, and I've regretted it ever since. Is like one of the lines that his dad says, right? And it's this thing where he's just like you just got to find a woman for yourself that looks this way. But he doesn't think the whole world needs to be that way. You know what I mean?
right. I
And
mean,
it's
he's
weird.
friends with Mauricio too. Like, no
Right, right.
offense to Mauricio, but like, he's got that hair that's like just
Clearly a
chia seeds. It's
yeah,
not even
yeah,
a
yeah.
wig. It's like he sprinkles it on.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. So there's this weird balance that they're trying to run with Hal, and I don't think that they ever find it. Where in that he is willing to accept this in the rest of the world, but can't seem to accept it in his own personal life. You know what I mean? It's very weird line that they walk. But yeah, one day Hal runs into Tony Roberts.
Tony Robbins.
Tony Robbins, sorry. Who, by the way, fantastic acting job in this movie for a dude that this is not his like normal thing, right? But I mean, I thought he was actually kind of charismatic and would love to see him in other like I think he'd be do really
Oh,
well
you think
in
that
more of these
Tony
like romantic.
Robbins, the guy who just convinces people that what he says should be like the way they live their life, is charismatic?
And
Go on.
but that's what I mean is like I cannot. I'm surprised he did not do more like film appearances because like the dude's got it. Like he like you're saying he made a career out of being like popular and likable just being himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but I think that's the thing. I think that like he did this movie and then he's like, I can't do any other movies. I was in Shallow Hal.
Oh no, I don't want to think. Really, you think that this has kind of just
I
ruined
mean,
it for
like,
him?
I wonder. I
Yeah.
legitimately wonder. Like, I had such a fondness for this film, and and that's the reason why I recommended it. And I still have a weird fondness for this film, like because like the way I felt when I watched it last night is not going to supplant the way I felt the time I saw it in theaters, or like every subsequent time, or like my biggest memory is like I was hanging out with a girl who used to babysit me as we were both adults, and we watched Shallow Hal and drank and had this great time. And it's just like that memory will never be supplanted by the fact that this movie not that great.
No, because the moment is more important than the movie itself, which is totally understandable. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's tons of shitty movies that I've seen that I had a good time with because of the people that I saw them with. I mean, that's it. That's what we preach on this show.
exactly.
Yeah, no, but so this movie just goes in some really,
All right, so he meets Tony Robbins, who in
yeah.
this world, in addition to being a motivational speaker, is also a magical creature. I think he's like a reverse Hagrid
Yeah,
because he's a
yeah.
giant, but he can use magic. And his pants are so high. He wears his pants so high.
So through like a series of unfortunate events, him and Hal end up stuck in an elevator together for some time, and Hal is himself, like his weird, awkward self, and he takes his pants off. I don't know why that happens. Uh, it's it's like this weird thing in movies. This isn't the only movie to do this. It's like those weird thing in movies. Whenever somebody gets stuck somewhere, they just start taking layers of clothing off,
Oh, it's
and
so
like
hot. I'm so hot in here.
right, like instantly, any locked door means that like the temperature starts rising over time.
Well, it's
Like,
the carbon siege. Every
mm,
time in a film where they're trapped in a confined space and people start taking off their clothes, that is a subtle hint about global warming and how serious it is. And
oh, I
how you should
see
do it. Is the
the
global
Hollywood
war-
agenda.
No, I mean I'm not crazy, but like I could also believe that there's someone out there who does believe that because the
um,
carbon levels are rising in that elevator.
so after he half nakedly explains to Tony Robbins there, Robbins, right?
Robbins.
Now, oh, he said it right. Okay. He explains his view on the world and how he wants to find a woman that's like beautiful first and then like interesting second. Tony Robbins does some weird magic on him, and suddenly, every person he sees every person for the beautiful person that they are inside, or I have to assume only women, or I have to assume for the ugliness that they are inside, because he doesn't seem to see beautiful versions of anybody that he already knows,
Right.
which
So
is weird.
I have a thing here. I believe that there's got to be some sort of grandfather clause, or
Okay.
like so that he can't look at somebody and be like, "Oh, who the hell is that?" Like it would
Because
be
he
too jarring
because he
for
already
him.
has an image in his head of what they are. He just can't get a different vision of them. That is what they are to him.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
But it definitely works on both males and females
Oh,
because
that's
he
true.
sees Rosemary. We haven't even brought up Rosemary yet as a character, but he
Well, the movie
sees
doesn't, to be
her.
fair.
That's true. Even though Gwyneth Paltrow gets top billing, which was
Yeah,
strange to me.
yeah.
I mean, it makes sense if you're selling a movie in 2001. Gwyneth Paltrow's getting butts in the seats.
Well, and out of anybody in this movie, she puts in the most work. Like you can't deny, like the prosthetic stuff that they eventually do to her in the last 30 minutes of the film. Like, uh, she had to. She that is the selling point of this movie. Like when you're selling it to a studio, when you're selling it to an audience, like Gwyneth Paltrow being the target for this is the selling point, right? Like, so of course she gets top billing. Is what I'm saying.
Yes. No, no, no. Of course she gets top. No, I have no issue with that. But it's just like, it's weird that your top billed person, again, doesn't show up for half an hour.
Yeah, half an hour into the movie. Yeah. So, anyways, yes.
But
Go
he
ahead.
does see her ex-boyfriend and his buddy as handsome people while under the spell. And he also, in a scene that's sort of problematic, again, with 2018 eyes, he sees the hostess as this beautiful young woman, and then he has the spell removed, and it's a transgendered male.
Yeah. Well, so that's where one of the things to actually kind of look at. I will never use this word again while talking about a Farrelly Brothers movie, but it's one of the few subtle things that actually works for me in this film. Is if you notice, all of the people that turn out to be not what he saw them as, when the people that he saw as most beautiful when he was under the spell, all turn out to be pretty decent people. I can't think of one of them that he sees under the spell that doesn't end up turning out that isn't also like a good person, because like her ex and all that shit, like as much of a doof as he is, he also like is going off to run like a Peace Corps mission and things like that, right? Like there is a sense that we are given that he is at least a decent person, right?
Right. But I guess my big issue with that is whose moral compass are they using to
Exactly.
make a beautiful person on the
Yeah,
inside?
right,
Like,
right.
you see Tanya, the nurse, as
Hmm.
the old woman, and then you have that moment where she's interacting with just Rosemary, and she's like a beautiful sort of young thing. But then she's talking about how basically she's using Walt because he's rich.
Right.
And so she is like this ugly thing on the inside. So, first of all, Tony Robbins did not say that he would also give him the ability to see people as ugly. Which, that's a thing I'd like mentioned in the orientation of having Tony Robbins vision. I'm not gonna lie. But also, like, there's some stuff where like Rosemary plays the ponies. She doesn't play the ponies. She likes dog racing, and
Yeah.
and like, I don't really have an issue with that, honestly, right? Or like gambling, but like, those are things that might not make someone look like Gwyneth Paltrow.
Right. Yeah, no, it's weird. What the rules on it are really where this thing starts to get problematic. It starts to get problematic and then it just gets worse from here, right? Is that up until now, like, okay, we've had this character that is an asshole, but we're being told he's going to learn a lesson by the end of this film, right? Because that's what these comedy movies do. So like everything up until now, as problematic as it may have been, you're hoping it's on the foot of like, but this is going to get better. But instead, what happens is this movie just takes a fucking nosedive once the magic is introduced, because exactly what you're talking about. Who gets to choose what is beautiful and what is not, like, is never made clear in this movie, and like what metric they're using for good and bad. But also the idea that there is no beauty to be found in their physical appearances, but if you look inside, you'll find something really hot and sexy,
Well, like, there's
is also a really problematic way of looking at beauty. Like, as much as it's a better quote unquote way of looking at it, then I'm gonna just marry the first beautiful woman I see and hope that she's smart. Like, that's not great. But this new vision he has isn't great either, because it's still based on him seeing physical beauty that he thinks is beautiful.
my
And then
exact note is he's still shallow, just a different kind of shallow.
yeah, his bar is just lower. He's still shallow. It's just that whatever shitty bar he's using to measure women against, he has been lowered immensely. Is essentially all that's happened. It's like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's really. I mean, and other things that like that, like, there are those guys. They go to the fuel place to eat. Okay, so he meets Rosemary,
Hmm.
at a Why is he at the department store? Does he
Who knows?
follow her inside, or
I don't know.
like?
He's on the prowl for
Like,
women,
he's,
and
he's like, I'm gonna use this Tony Robbins power,
yeah.
because, well, here's a question though before we go further. They go to the bar. He goes to the bar with Mauricio. Hey, Mud Whistle, get dressed. We're going out. Mud Whistle? I don't
I
know
God,
what
yeah,
that
oh
is.
God.
Um, and they go out, and he meets this girl, this redhead girl, and he goes and he dances with her friends. And there's one reason why I'm bringing this up, and that is George Costanza, I mean Mauricio, I mean Jason Alexander. He refers to the three women that Hal is dancing with as the hyena, the giraffe, and the hippo.
Right.
because from Mauricio's standpoint, that's what they look like. One of them is very overweight. But then my question is, and I know that I am being superficial in this moment, but it plays on things that I have questions about later on in the film. Is if that girl that he is dancing with is as heavy or more heavy than Rosemary turns out to be.
Are you like
Like I
I
know that's such a ridiculous. First of all, casting on this movie had to have been problematic on both sides of the coach.
right.
Like, cause they're like, oh, we need to find a really overweight girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do they put out an ad for that?
Uh-huh.
Like,
No, I know, man. I mean, like, and it's weird. It's this weird thing because you could tell that they're trying so hard to tell this really heartfelt story because it's the most heartfelt movie I think that they attempt to make, honestly.
yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's
uh,
why I nominated it for best Farrelly Brothers film.
right, right. There's a level of emotion to this one that's just not present in their other movies, right? And they're trying so hard to make a good point, but they're just so tone deaf about it every step of the way. That's what it is, you know. And like all this stuff that you're pointing out is like spot on. The lines that they're drawing, that what they're trying to figure out, what makes this girl heavy and that girl heavier, and like all of this weird stuff that they have to do. And you're right, it bleeds into the filmmaking, right? Like, how do they cast these roles? At what point is there a double used for Gwyneth Paltrow's scenes, and at what point is it her in makeup? Because they clearly didn't put her in makeup for the entire thing for
Well,
a
they
lot of
clearly
those
didn't put her in
scenes.
makeup for every scene where we don't see her face, right? Like that
Right.
has to be a stand-in.
Yeah, there's a ton of moments where they use stand in when and she's looking away from the camera or the camera doesn't quite pan up far enough, that sort of thing. So like, who is that actress, right? It's a whole mess of trouble from the get go about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, yeah, it really is.
Well, part of me wonders if I would have felt this way if I was at this point in my life that I am now, but when it came out in 2001. You know what I mean? Would I be feeling this way, or would I be applauding this movie for making some strides? You know what I mean? I can't quite figure it out because I'll be honest, there's a lot of stuff in rewatching things like Seinfeld around that same time, late 90s, getting to that point, doing this kind of comedy that like I do watch now, and I'm just like, ooh, yeah, that wouldn't work now. That just wouldn't work now. But I'm able to see it as part of its time, you know. But this movie, I don't even know if I don't know where I would
Well,
stand
I
with
know.
it
I
on
mean,
it.
as far as I remember, people were upset about this film, saying it was exploitive of the heavier women who were cast in it, and then
Yeah,
having Gwyneth Paltrow for those other scenes, like not doing like double casting the way they did with other people. Like
yeah.
this movie did not skate away without shade being thrown upon it.
Yeah, I just wonder like what would happen if they had had like a Jenny McCarthy. I mean, yeah, no, I said that right, right?
Do you mean Melissa McCarthy?
Melissa McCarthy, thank you. Melissa McCarthy type back then that was able to play those kinds of roles and like not had there ever been a moment of change. You know what I mean? Like Hal just sees her as something beautiful now, but like there's no change for the audience. Like that's the other really problematic thing filmmaking wise for me is why do we as the audience need to see her in a different way than what she is? Why could they have not found an actress that Hal would not have found attractive to him, but like as an audience, we can still sit there and connect with her on a romantic level, and like when he finally comes around, like you know what I mean? I feel like
Along
that would
that
be
same line of thought, Sejohn, why is what makes her so disgusting the fact that she's obese?
right.
Why is
No, for
like
sure.
that's where they went
Hmm.
with, and it's like and what the question that I have, and this is a question I had long before this viewing, right? This is something that's bothered me ever since 2001 because I never thought it was funny. Is the chairs that break while she's sitting in them?
Yeah, the
Like,
constant. Yeah,
how heavy is the character of Rosemary supposed to be that she breaks a steel, she just flattens a steel chair
right.
and breaks an entire booth at a restaurant?
Yeah, yeah,
Like, it just doesn't make those two jokes. First of all, they're not funny. Both of those sequences are not funny. They're like more awkward than anything else.
yeah.
Like, you could tell me someone else did this movie, and I would believe you until those very Farrelly brother moments happen.
Yeah, it's such a they come from such an old school style of comedy, like as writers, which is clear in a lot of the stuff that they do. I mean, like look at all of the something about Mary jokes and everything too. One of the things that people loved about something about Mary is it reminded them of like a late '80s comedy. You know, that was the big that was around the big time when like American Pie was coming out, and people were really happy to go back to these really raunchy, like edgy comedies that we were getting in the late '70s and '80s and all that sort of stuff, right? And I feel like these guys did grow up on like National Lampoon and Mad Magazine, right? So it makes sense that they're doing very like Animal House style comedy. It's just that they don't live in that time. They don't live in that world anymore, and it's this weird like stubbornness to like get with the time that they're in. Because imagine if they had been more inventive and used that style of comedy to tell much more progressive stories. You know what I mean? Like, how great would it be to have somebody that could do that kind of stuff? Like, I don't know. Is there somebody I can't think off the top of my head, somebody that's doing that kind of like pratfall style comedy, but it's also doing I don't know. I like maybe it
I
just doesn't work in this now.
it's not
Like maybe
something I
that's a
ever
style of
thought
comedy that
of.
works,
That
right? Like who's is there a Fairley Brothers equivalent for the indie scene? You know what I mean? Like,
I
and
mean,
I'm sure
there's
there
a little
is.
bit of me that would be like Seth Gordon,
I mean,
with like the first Horrible Bosses.
yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
lot of stuff like that, and he
I
was
guess that's
coming
true. Todd
off
Phillips.
of, yeah, like, but at the same time, they're aware. I need you to look something up for me because I know that you have your computer up. I mean,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have my
What's up?
computer up too. That's how I record. But I need you to look out when the Heartbreak Kid came out.
Is that the remake that they did,
The
or
remake that they did, yeah, with Ben Stiller, and
oh, I think I have. Hold on, I think I have the Wikipedia just up right here. Hold
it might be
on.
2007. It's just
2007 on the nose.
okay,
And they were just directors and writers. They had to sell that movie in order to produce it, so
right.
they were yeah
That movie's awful. Like
yeah
that
yeah.
movie. I mean, Stuck on
And it
You
was it
is
was
so.
supposed to
Can
be
you
their
can you give me
return.
their full filmography? So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
did
yeah.
Shallow Hal, and I believe they did Say It Isn't
Say
So
yeah,
beforehand, right?
2001 was their big year because they actually even had a third movie that
Oh,
year.
jeez.
Do you know?
No,
You pull it out?
no,
All
I
right,
am not
so
even
let's
gonna
start back
look.
in '94. So let's start back in '94. We got Dumb and Dumber as their first thing,
Dumb and Dumber.
and
Okay.
it comes out, and I think that still holds up. I think if you watch Dumb and Dumber, I think it actually is still like because of the fact that all of the comedy is just straight up Three Stooges style, just pratfall comedy, and it's not.
They're also not mean. I will say that about Dumb and
Oh,
Dumber.
the whole
Hal
point of
and
them is they
Harry and
love each
Lloyd.
other and they
Yeah.
love the world. Yeah, and other people are mean to them, but those people always get their comeuppance, which is the whole point of that. It's honestly like watching a Looney Tunes cartoon.
You know what? I
Like
said they're not mean, but then Lloyd totally gives Harry the laxatives.
Well, okay, they get mean, which is like that's the conflict of that movie is when they suddenly do start getting mean, and that's when shit goes bad for them. It isn't until they learn to love again that things are better, right?
That's
Like
true. I mean, like if
that's
there was a
yeah,
message to that film, it's that like love
they
one
gotta
another.
and they've got to be nice to each other in order to survive. And then the next movie they do is Kingpin, which is a movie that at the time was a little rough, in its receiving because it was, it's a comedy follow up, and people always give comedy follow up shit. But I actually think Kingpin is another one that if you go back and watch, is still a pretty decent film. Woody Harrelson in that movie is
Woody
just
Harrelson's
phenomenal.
fantastic in that film.
I mean Bill
Even
Murray.
Randy Quaid. Like,
I mean,
think, like
it
that's
is.
Randy Quaid.
It is one of the rare roles with Randy Quaid where you're just like, man, I want this dude to keep making movies. We've talked about our love of Randy Quaid before, though.
Yeah.
And then there's something about Mary is the next thing that comes out, right? And that's the big thing. Then it comes their most probably personal movie that they make, and that's Outside Providence, and that's Alec Baldwin as the dad, and it's this kid like trying to get the hell out of Rhode Island and all that sort of shit. And
The
it's
book is way better than the movie. I'm gonna be
okay.
that guy.
That's
That
fine.
book is so
Well, and
good.
they only do the writing on the script for that one. They didn't even direct that one. That's they but and so they get to call it a Farrelly Brothers film, but they don't do as much of that one. Then there's Me, Myself, and Irene, which I think is their next big hit. Right, I think that's the one financially that does the best so far since there's something about Mary. Say It Isn't So, Shallow Hal, and Osmosis Jones are all 2001.
Oh, they did Osmosis Jones.
Yeah, yes, they did. They produced and directed Osmosis Jones. Yeah, and then they ended up producing the TV show as well.
Yeah.
And then the next year is stuck. No, sorry, 2003 is Stuck on You, which does not get received well. And then comes Fever Pitch, or what's the other name for it? The Perfect Catch is the other name for it
Yeah,
too. But Fever Pitch, which is actually a remake of a foreign film, um,
called Fever Pitch, based on a
called Fever
book by Nick
Pitch. Yeah,
Hornsby, the
yeah.
writer of High Fidelity.
Yeah, and
If
it's
you
actually well, and that's what makes that movie actually work really well is they just direct this film, but it comes from a different writer, a different place. So like as much as their style of goofy comedy is in it, it really is more about their love of like Boston and their love of like the New England area than anything else. The Ringer comes out that same year. It was a forgettable but pretty decent film. I mean like
forgettable, yes, but my family quotes that film at least once a month.
right. Right.
So
It's one of those movies, and it's one of those movies that catches a lot of slack because it's a kind of exploitive. You know, Fairley Brothers is what we're talking about here. Like and Johnny Knoxville. It's fairly exploitive of people with disabilities, mental and physical. But at the same time, it also uses a cast full of those actors with disabilities, which is so rare. And a lot of the cast on that film felt like this is a great opportunity for them. You know, it's really rare that roles like this exist in these films and are played by people with those disabilities. So like it's this weird controversial move in a
yeah, I
lot
mean,
of
even right
cinema.
there, you can point at controversy because then there are some members of that film's cast who have mental or physical disabilities who are not, who are just
Right.
people who are acting that way.
Yeah. Then is Heartbreak Kid, 2007, followed up by Hall Pass. I don't know. I've heard mixed reviews from Hall Pass. I've heard people that love that movie, and I've heard people I've never seen it. I
Hall Pass would
honestly,
probably be my second nominee for their best film because
yeah,
it has a lot of heart in a lot of weird ways. Again, I'm remembering when I saw it like back then. I don't know
yeah.
how it would like stay
I
under a microscope now, but
I weirdly
it's
personally have a really hard time with like Wanderlust storylines. Like
I don't blame you for that, to be
yeah,
completely honest.
I don't know why. Like I'm not like a, but I know that I know that it's me. Because I know that there are good movies out there that deal with that sort of stuff, and I cannot get into them. I struggle to get into them.
The
Um,
problem with that movie is that the marketing makes it seem like it's all about the guys, but the women have a lot to say too.
yeah.
Like there's a good balance in that film, and that's where it, I mean, from what I'm remembering, again, I haven't seen it in years, but I remember the balance being like what impressed me.
And then we kind of hit their downward swing. We've got three movies in a row that just don't work. The Three Stooges, which is just a mess. Movie 43, which they actually straight up got sued for left and right, and then Dumb and Dumber 2 that nobody really seemed to enjoy or want.
My Dumb and Dumber 2 memory is when I was like sick with a high fever and I watched it 3 times in a row on HBO.
Oh man. And then the last one to come out that is actually just Peter Farrelly only. He directed Viggo Mortensen, and I'm not gonna say Mahershala Ali's name correctly, so I'm
Mahershala
sorry.
Ali.
Thank you.
The new movie that's coming out.
Green Book is
Green
a
Book,
Peter
that comes
Farrelly
out this
directed
year.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is a Peter Farrelly directed film, but clearly not in their same vein of film as what we're usually talking about. So I'm very interested to see what happens with that because it looks like it's a much heavier. It is still considered a dramedy by all of the write-ups, so like. Clearly there's going to be comedic elements to it, but it looks like a much heavier film than what they normally deal with. So that'll be an interesting
Yeah, I
thing to
saw
see.
the trailer
Maybe.
when I left Venom, and I'm like,
Well,
I can't
yeah.
say wait to see this film.
So it's their longest gap between films, I think. I think if you do the math, like 4.5 years, I think it's the longest gap between that and Dumb and Dumber 2. And I don't know. They clearly took some time off, and they're clearly not doing the same thing they were doing. So hopefully they learned some stuff. I don't know. I don't know. It's not a bad run of films. Like, I mean, even the ones that we talked about as being controversial or not well received still did well financially. You know, you'd be hard pressed to find a movie of theirs that I think they'd say wasn't worth their time doing. I think that they feel like they get a lot out of doing this stuff, and they have people that come back to them all the time. I mean, Ben Stiller's made straight up 3 movies with them. I they they get casts. I mean, we talked about the cast on this alone. Like you have You have Gwyneth Paltrow, you have Jack Black, you have all these weird little side roles that are then filled out by guys like Jason Alexander. As I mentioned, Kyle Gass shows up. Who did you say for the dad there? Bruce
Oh,
McGill,
Bruce
right?
McGill,
Yeah,
Molly
Bruce McGill is
Shannon,
the dad.
uncredited
Molly
as his
Shannon,
mother.
as yeah, for just that one moment in the morning, in the beginning of the movie. But even her dad is, oh God, he's the dude that was on like The Sopranos and
He
stuff,
was
right?
no. He was in Mickey Blue Eyes.
Mickey Blue Eyes,
That's
that's who
what
it
I
is.
that's all I see when I look at him is Mickey Blue Eyes.
Um,
And the mom is like I think Shannon Hagee. Maybe that's her name. I don't remember. But yeah, like it's a lot of these people who are like, yeah, they could do it. They had cachet in Hollywood and they made it work for them. But
right.
the reason I asked you to go on that whole filmography of the Farrelly brothers was Heartbreak Kid was when I was done with them.
Okay.
I need to admit that.
I mean that makes total sense. I mean that is really kind of the beginning of the end for them, and since then they haven't really had a financially or critically successful film. Because even Hall Pass, which came right after that, was kind of lukewarm
Like I
reception and
saw Hall
financially,
Pass 2014. Like I didn't see
yeah.
that right away, and I was surprised at the end to see that it was a Farrelly brothers film.
Mm,
Like it surprised me. Same with movie 43. I watched that in my year of 365 movies as my 43rd movie because I
yeah.
thought that that'd be cute. And like, oh, okay, this is something. And you know what? It's bold comedy. Like you got to give them some credit for like shooting something like that. But then
Yeah.
when I saw who it was, I'm like, I'm not really surprised, honestly.
There's a lot of weird stuff with that movie. It is very much a contractual film through and through. Anybody and everybody, including I believe the two of them involved, are all only there because of contracts that they all had with, was it Paramount that did that one?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, it was like contracts that they had with the company, and they Relativity is the big one that was behind it. And basically, they were just like, you have to make a movie for us. Like you're all obligated to this many movies, and basically everybody did it as a write-off. They could show up on screen for like 5 minutes because it was all sketches, right? And like they were able to just walk away from that film and wash their hands of it immediately. I believe Hugh Jackman came out and said something about like he just it's his most regrettable thing that he ever did because he just in his head he was like, oh, 10 minutes and I don't have to worry about this contract essentially. And he's like, I would have rather have made 1,000 more movies than being that again. Yeah. It's a weird little it's a weird little piece of hell that I think is really interesting to study.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Let's get back to Shallow Hal and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
some
yeah.
quick stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, I didn't realize I'd feel this way about it watching it again and so problematic. But here's some issues that I have with the film, right?
Yeah.
Rosemary is shown as super self-conscious, right, about the clothing that she wears and all this other stuff. But then when they go to the pool, she wears a bikini.
Yeah.
And then immediately in the next scene after that, she's wearing super revealing clothing.
Hmm.
And she's self-conscious about it again. And then in the weirdest thing, that's the night that she and Hal first like make love. They spend the
Right.
night together. They have sex. Let's call it what it is. And she's like, and there's a swear you're not gonna laugh is what she says. After a day wearing more revealing clothing than the negligee that she's about to enter frame in.
Right.
Like it doesn't
Right.
like it just doesn't make
Well,
any
it's that,
sense.
yeah. Well, that's the weird Hollywood thing where like you can have girls running around in bikinis all day, but the second that you say it's lingerie, it becomes like risque, right? Like that's just a weird Hollywood thing that's present in a lot of things, and this movie does not get away from it at all.
Right.
For a movie that's all about like looks and that sort of shit, it doesn't actually make a commentary on where any of that really comes from. The only moment of that is with his dad, and it's one scene in the beginning, and it's never quite addressed like later on as that being the source of the issue. You know what I mean? Like it is pretty much through and through never really addressed where the cause of all of this shit comes from in society. Because even the shit that people give him about his looks is weird, right? Like, yeah.
Well, the
Uh,
exact question I asked Dale, I'm like, is Hal not that good looking? And Dale's response was, he's goofy and his sideburns are too long.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. Yep.
Man.
Impossible to get a girlfriend because you're kind of goofy and your sideburns are too long.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like,
I like
I don't
yeah.
know. It's just, I didn't expect this film to exhaust me the way that it did. and that
Yeah.
really kind of bummed me out. But now I'm thinking about it that I brought it up. Was Rosemary wearing that bikini and that revealing clothing at the behest of Hal?
Well, I don't know if it's at the behest of him so much as he was giving. I think we're supposed to believe that he's been giving her the confidence to try and do these things. Not that he's been asking for it, not that he's been making her do it, but because of his attitude towards her over the last few days, that gives her the courage to try something like that. Now, that would have been beautiful if they actually explained that in the movie. I think that it's implied through some of the montaging that they do in those moments that she's getting kind of more comfortable with herself because she's with somebody that is comfortable with her body, which is,
But then
out
I
of
also
out of
have
the
a bit of
context
an
of the
issue
film
with
is an
like
interesting idea. But no,
so
go ahead.
but why is her comfortability reflected in more revealing clothing?
Hmm?
Like I have a problem with that being what they think the litmus test of a woman and her
Yeah, no,
comfortability is.
no, you're not wrong. That is also a problematic thing, but one that I think is outside of this movie present in the world. I do think the idea of women having the confidence to wear a bikini is a metric that people use about comfortability with themselves. I do think that is something that is still existent in the world outside of this film. You know what I mean? Like as shitty as that idea is, it is not something that I think we can lay at the feet of the Farrelly brothers as much as we can the rest of the stuff in this movie. Um, yeah, I don't know. I have a small list of things that I like really enjoy about this film
All right.
still.
Well, let me just
Yeah,
knock
no,
out some of these more negative things.
yeah.
Apparently, a pretty girl isn't funny, smart, or nice. Like that's a weird statement that they make near the end of it. She's funny, she's smart, she's nice. Those aren't pretty girls, Hal. Like it's like what? Like then why would you want to be with one? Then
Right.
why are you so invested in being with a pretty girl that you'll be like, I want to be with someone who's boring, dumb, and mean to me?
I mean, essentially, they've created a world in this movie in which you're either pretty and an idiot and mean, or not pretty, but you're the best human on Earth. You are willing to give up your entire life to take care of all other humans because something in your not pretty body tells you to, which is yeah. And then of course never really give you a line as to what pretty means or not, you know?
Right.
Yeah,
There's no,
yeah.
there's also like the whole Jill character, who this is the first time we brought up Jill, right? So let's talk about how important she really is to the film, right? If this were a TV show, right, I could totally see it being Hal's plan is like, oh, she thinks I'm shallow. I'm going to date a bunch of girls who are not traditionally pretty, and then she'll think I'm unshallow, right? Like it's totally a Seinfeld plot. Like
Yeah.
it's a Seinfeldian plot.
Yeah.
But she totally falls for it, even though that's not what he's doing.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's
Like,
weird. She becomes attracted to him because he suddenly starts. I mean, I think we're told it's because he's suddenly not so shallow that he is now attractive to her, which is a nice thought, but in execution in the film is completely weird because essentially she starts talking to him about how now that he's not into her, essentially she's now into him, is what it
yeah.
becomes.
And I think what my like the best moment of that is her saying to him, if anything, you're pathologically unshallow. And then the next words out of his mouth are you wearing panties? Like nailed it, Jill. You are a good judge of character. Can
Yeah.
I use you as a reference for my next job interview?
Yeah, no, it's pretty
Let's
bad.
see. I am curious how many people Hal actually went to bed with using the Tony Robbins magic.
Yeah,
Because there's that
because he goes on a
thing.
rampage.
Well, he kind of goes on a rampage, and he says that thing to Mauricio where he's like, so you're saying all these girls I've been scoring with, like, what?
Yeah, yeah. No, I
And
mean,
also, he's lucky he finds people who are kind to him. Because, like, seeing the inverse of people, which is basically what the movie says he's seeing, could totally end poorly for you.
yeah. Well, and there's also a weird element. Why are they all kind of kowtowing to his shittiness? Like these quote unquote ugly people. Why are they putting up with his shittiness? Like that's another thing. Is as much as these people are supposed to be good, kind people, they also are supposedly so. Hey, here we go back on the dichotomy. You're either pretty and mean and an idiot, or you're ugly and so lacking in confidence that you are willing to be treated like utter shit by this character, and you still want to like go to bed with him at night or whatever it is or see him the next day. You know what I mean? Like there's this weird element of them also accepting him and his crappiness, which sucks.
Yeah, I I don't freaking
Hmm.
know. And last like negative thing. Why the fuck does Mauricio have a tail?
Okay, so you were saying earlier the stuff about him and the animal stuff, and it was really hard for me to not blurt this out because it is revealed in the final like third of the movie, 20 minutes of the movie, that that his best friend, Jason Alexander's character, the reason that he cannot get close to people and get close to women specifically is because he has a vestigial tail that is, quote, wrapped around an artery, no doctor will touch it.
Thank you for the
So
quote.
so he so so he yeah even reveals it, and we are given this like weird little like I don't know CGI prosthetic. I couldn't quite tell what it was, but that they did to that poor man. It was worse than his hair, and I didn't think that that would be possible for the hour and a half that I was watching his hair beforehand. But they reveal this, and it's interesting that he reviews, again, weird subtlety that I didn't think I'd ever expect from the Farrelly brothers. He views women that are not pretty as animalistic, and it's interesting because the thing that he views as an ugliness in himself is an animalistic trait, like an actual physical animalistic trait. So like it's this weird thing that because of his tail, he treats women in this way and he treats women like that. And it's a weird justification for his attitude up to that point that we're given. Like it's somehow supposed to redeem him in that moment because then at the end of the movie, 20 minutes later, we see him walk off with a woman that's way into dogs and like his little tail wagging. Last shot of the film. Like that's weird. It's fucking weird that we're suddenly supposed to be okay with everything about this character because we learn that he has this deformity. And like I'm trying to think, was it Peter Davidson like a couple of weeks ago that just talking about Kanye losing his shit on SNL, and he came out and said your mental issues are not an excuse to act like a jackass, right? And I feel like that was like a lesson this movie needed left and right, is like just because these people have these issues does not give them the right to treat everybody else in the world like shit. So like it's weird because his tail is supposed to be this redeeming quality about him, but you're right, it is pointless and the joke is not even funny.
Ugh.
It's just weird. It's
It's
just
just
weird.
weird. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, that's unsettling. What is
Well, and like,
happening?
and let's take a step back. A movie that is supposed to be about not being shallow. Like, this is a thing that happens in the world. Vestigial tales are still a thing that happen with
Hmm.
people, and they deal with. So like, it's this weird moment where they show it, and the reaction that you have right now is supposed to be the reaction of just like all the shit you've been giving everybody, and you're just as ugly as them. That's the worst fucking line to land on. But that is exactly the line that they land on with that joke because like the whole lesson you're supposed to be teaching people about not judging people by their physical traits and attributes, and here you are, one of the last jokes of the film is about this dude's physical attribute that we are all supposed to find funny and gross.
Right.
So it just kills everything that they did. It
All
just
the
undercuts
momentum
the
is
whole
gone.
movie. Yeah. So let's before we go, like let's just talk about a couple of things that are worth talking about with this movie still. First and
Yes.
foremost, this soundtrack, and I think the Farrelly brothers do this pretty frequently. The soundtrack is pretty spot on amazing. There's not a track in this that I didn't think was great in the moment, and also a few tracks that I'm now going to actually go out and like download to just have in my queue. Like there's some stuff in this movie, and I think the best example of this is Something About Mary. The way that music is straight up
Oh yeah.
written into the movie, right? But I mean, even the Dumb and Dumber soundtrack is pretty good. Like go back to their first film, and they've always just been able to put together a very me style like collection of music. So we line up really well that way.
And
Probably, I mean,
love
we have
grows, open parentheses, where my rosemary goes, close
yeah.
parentheses. It's just a great fucking song.
Well, and
And
in a weird way, you can
yeah.
tell that that's where they started, right?
Yeah.
Like, is they started with that, with the oh, we have to write a movie about a woman named Rosemary, right? Like, yeah, it's a great song.
Okay. So what else
Um,
do you have to add?
I'm trying to look at my list here to see what are some of the other good things. I mean, like, it's weird that we haven't talked about this yet, but there's this part of me whenever I watch one of the Fairley Brothers films where there is this little moment of pride, right? The like Rhode Island aspect of all of that
Well,
stuff.
that's the thing. I was trying to figure out where they are because there's
Right.
a moment where they go to Wachusett Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Wachusett Mountain
Mm-hmm.
because they take a turn and it's like that's the turn onto Wachusett Mountain, and they drive by this red barn. We've
Mm-hmm.
driven by that barn, Sejohn.
Yeah, I know. And everybody talks about being from just up in Boston. Like there's like a girl that he runs into and she's just like, I'm down from Boston to see my sick grandmother. And it's like, oh.
But
So
it
clearly they're
doesn't
in that
look
area.
like Providence.
No, no. It's
And they're
clearly filmed in
drinking
like Northern
Seattle's
California.
best. Well,
Yeah.
it's filmed in North Carolina,
North
actually.
Carolina? Really?
Charlotte.
Yeah. some there was definitely a weird ocean close element to a lot of this that I think that I was because there's a lot of weird moments where I couldn't tell if maybe they were filming in like multiple areas in the country, which seemed fucking ridiculous for me for a comedy film that the Farrelly brothers were making. But like there were definitely moments where I was like, oh, maybe they are in New England, and then moments when they weren't. So that must have been like North Carolina, and
Yeah.
like
Well,
yeah.
here's the weird one. They're like, "Oh, I'm still dressed from the beach," and it's like they were at a swimming pool. They
Hmm.
weren't at a beach.
Right.
What are you
Yeah,
trying
yeah,
to
yeah.
do?
Yeah, man. I don't know. You ever been to Chan's down in Woonsocket?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's the Fairley Brothers like hangout. It's the a jazz and Chinese food club. It's actually a weird combination that works pretty well. But their big claim to fame is they had Dizzy Gillespie play like years and years and years ago. But anybody that's in that area should go check that place out. Also, Fairley Brothers posters everywhere because apparently they bring all of their casts to that place.
I believe it.
Um, but yeah, so like there's this weird like Rhode Island this like wrapped up in a lot of it that also kind of hits me in a weird place. So I always wonder like as I'm watching these movies if I'm giving them too much credit on that. I don't know, man. Yeah, I okay. I want to talk a second about the kids stuff because as much as there's a weird element to that and the way that they handle that, it still brings a tear to my eye every time he meets her for the second time
Here's
in the
the
yeah.
exact word I wrote down is as rough as this film is, that Candace scene is heartbreaking and beautiful
Yes. Yeah.
because it is.
Yeah,
It
that second time
is.
that he meets Candace in the and he realizes where he was the first time, it's beautifully structured because they don't reveal where they are the first time. And I don't know why, I just assumed it was like a cancer ward, but then you find out that's not what it was at all. It was a burn ward, which makes total sense with everything that's happened in that movie so far. And you're right, it is as rough as the rest of the movie is. That scene in particular is just well done. It's just well done.
But there is this question, and
Okay.
it's because of the words that are written. It's why I wanted to save this for last.
Yeah.
And it is, she's like, it's so great how you are with them because most people act afraid, and she says all this stuff about that, and he's like thinks that she's crazy, but like I wonder, based on what we know of Hal, if he had just met those people without Tony Robbins' vision, how he would have reacted.
Oh,
And you
I'm
want to
100%
believe that he
sure.
would have reacted positively.
No. I'm
No? Okay,
100%
good.
sure
Ooh,
not.
thank you. I just want to
No,
make sure.
no.
I thought that's where you were going. And I'm
No,
like,
no,
oh,
no. I'm
Sejohn, no.
100% sure. No, he would have been on the scale of reactions because it is not just an either or reaction as much as this movie deals in just black and whites.
Yeah.
The it is not there's a scale, right? And I feel like he would have landed on the scale of like still being supportive of those kids and being as nice as he could be, but there would have been a line that he would not have been able to cross. He would not have picked Candace up and played with her in the way that he did in that earlier scene if he had known what was actually going on. And we see that moment of hesitation in that second scene. Again, another reason why it is so well structured. That scene in particular, I mean, not the movie,
Right.
but why it is so well structured is we do see a moment of hesitation in him, but him thinking back to the earlier moment with her and realizing how shitty of a thought that actually is, and he does actually put his arm on her shoulder by the end of that. By
He
the end
picks
of
her
that,
up.
like
He picks her
yeah,
up
yeah,
again. And
yeah, yeah. So it's like a straight up like he realizes that the way that he would have thought, the way that he would have acted, and realizes it was really shitty and doesn't act that way, and he learns. So it's like one of the only moments in the movie where you see like growth and actual arc, and it's the only few times where that happens, and it isn't at the expense of a shitty joke on somebody's appearance. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like
do. I
it
know exactly what
actually,
you mean.
it,
Like, it's the
like
reason why
yeah,
it's the scene that like I wanted to save it till the end.
yeah,
I mean,
because the
like,
actual end of this movie sucks. Because as much as he realizes he wants to be with Rosemary, the final joke for the two of them is he cannot pick her up and carry her out the threshold, so she has to carry him. And then she sits in the car, and it
and it
has to end on a fat joke.
shifts.
Yeah, yeah, like
And
yeah,
oh, and let's also talk about the fact that like he gives up everything to go join the Peace Corps with her, which
hmm
is like what like this movie. You're right. It deals in black and white. It's like you got to find balance. Like it's such a weird message of like no, you got to give up everything for her because you love her.
yeah,
It's just weird. It's just a weird movie, and
yeah.
I did not expect to be this voice on this podcast. Like I was like, oh, I'm excited to watch it because like 2001, we watched America's Sweethearts, and I'm like, you know what? Thinking back to that year, a movie that I really liked, Shallow Hal, and then I'm like, but I gotta watch it again, and it's like, oh, Like, this is probably the manifesto of the incel movement.
Yeah, right. There's definitely a lot in there that you can see is ripe for the plucking for later on but we're lucky that it didn't come out later because God knows what would have happened if it came out 5, 10 years later. And I think it's unfortunate that for the movie that it didn't come out 10 years earlier, because I bet if this was like 1991, 1993, maybe, like this would have been a much bigger hit, you know?
Yeah, is this the last example of a film with like supernatural overtones?
Um,
Like,
like as
but in
the
a real
no.
world setting?
No. I'm sure that kind of because you're thinking like Simple Magic and those kinds of
And
ones,
that
right?
kind of
Practical
stuff. Yeah,
Magic,
yeah.
yeah. No, I
I
don't
mean, I
know.
guess, yeah, like you have that one with Kristen Bell where she wishes in the fountain. But
Yeah.
that movie
So
works. That movie really works. What's the name
the
of that movie? When in
magical
Rome?
When in Rome, yes,
That
with
movie's
Danny
great.
DeVito and John Heder
Danny
and
DeVito, John Heder, Dax
Dax,
Shepard.
who ends up becoming her husband after that movie, right? Or
Yeah,
were they already married?
I
I
believe
think they
they
met on
met
that
on
movie.
that film. Will
Yeah.
Arnett as well, playing the
Hmm.
Italian stereotype. Like, it's a great flippin' cast.
Yeah.
Oh, and freaking Josh Duhamel.
Yes.
Like, God, wait, why didn't we watch When in Rome?
Yeah, I know. Maybe next time. Maybe that'll be the next
Time
time capsule
capsule.
episode we do. But yeah, this movie, I think that if it had come out earlier, it would have been in that same time period as Pretty Woman, right? And if we think about Pretty Women, the
Oh,
sequel,
when Jason Alexander was a rapist.
yeah, oh God,
Like, and I wasn't gonna bring it up until you literally said the
yeah,
words "pretty woman."
yeah, I know. But that's exactly my point, right? Is at the time that movie comes out and it's seen as this like beautiful romantic comedy that everybody loves, that everybody wants to be Julia Roberts or Richard Gere, all this
Everybody
other
wants
stuff,
to be
right?
a whore.
But now we look back on it and we're just like, oh, that's not the greatest example of this, right? And I feel like if Shallow Hal came out then, it would have had its moment in the sun where people would have really enjoyed it, thought it was really funny, talked about all the great stuff in it, and about how it was actually kind of slightly progressive for its time. But then we would have been reflecting on it now, 25 years old or 30 years old at this point, and like just been like, yeah, it was fine for its time, but it's not worth it now. I think when it came out, it was too late.
Yeah.
It was just too late.
At 17 years old, it really is. It's in a weird place in our entire like just pantheon of film.
Yeah.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sitting with us as we waded through the shallow end of the pool that is Shallow Hal.
Yeah, nice, very nice.
Yeah.
Golf
All
clap.
right. So until next time, if you want to yell at me for picking this film, I'm at Devon D. Decker on Twitter.
And if you can think of any movie that like deals with this sort of stuff well, I want to know about it. So you can hit me up at Siege versus the World.
And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to put the kibosh on. I Feel Pretty, released this year, not an example of that.
Okay,
Watch
yeah.
it. I mean, but we were comparing it last night to Shallow Hal, and while it's a little bit better in some of the stuff, in a lot of ways, it's still just as bad.
Yeah, no, John, it's the genre body switching beauty comedy, like that genre of comedy just doesn't really work now that we're a little bit more quote unquote woke on these issues, man. I think that's just a genre that just doesn't. But that's what I'm saying is if anybody out there can actually find one or thinks of one that actually works really well, like send it my way because I wanna take a look at it and see what it is that they do that makes it work.
Yeah, I'm interested too. So definitely hit at Siege versus the World with that information. And now, Shallow Will wants a gal.
Thank you for listening to the Say Report with your host Devon Decker and Sejohn Selwick. Please follow the guys on Twitter and Facebook by searching for The Say Report, and you can always subscribe on your podcast channel so it's delivered straight to you and you can enjoy it every week. With apologies to your mother, we'll see you next time.